If you found this podcast, chances are you're a high achiever and you're successful. But now you're stuck and stressed, and you realize that everything you've created hasn't given you the fulfillment and the joy you thought it would. This is where we discuss the keys of high performance mindset and stepping into the next best version of yourself. Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Bowen, and today I am super excited because I am joined by two-time TED Talk speaker, author, entrepreneur, documentary creator, holy cow, the list goes on, and all-around good guy, Adam Carroll. Adam, it is my pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Ian, thank you. I'm excited about us getting to spend some time together, and B, just seeing where the conversation takes us and what kind of similarities we come across, because I know there are many between you and I.
Yeah, I'm just super fortunate to have, or just for our listeners and viewers to know that I met Adam a few months ago at an amazing event called EncouragerCon, where he presented. And quick shout out to Mitch Matthews and shameless plug. That was an amazing event for all of the entrepreneurs that were there, and the speakers that were there were amazing, and just getting poured into with not only knowledge, but just like love and acceptance and appreciation. And the people that were there just in totality were just amazing. So I'm super excited to go back to EncouragerCon 2025 next year and experience that again. But after hearing Adam speak, I knew that I had to meet him and talk to him. And Adam, for someone who has experienced as much success in life as you have, I just love how approachable you are. Like you're so like disarming, and you would never know, and it's just so easy to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's funny, you read off the accomplishments on my list.
Some of them, and the list goes on.
I've done a number of things, and I think the thing that I really most appreciated about you and your message around positive persistence is, I've failed at things, but a good friend and I, we chat about this all the time. And our mentality is, we've tried more things than most people have failed at, or we failed more things than most people have tried at. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
We failed at more things than most people have tried. And I think that's part of the key of you get back up and you keep trying. For me, positivity and persistence and what I'm going after has been central to all the accomplishments.
Yeah. And that's part of what you talk about a little bit in your book, the Build a Bigger Life Manifesto. Love this book. And I want to talk about it. But before I go any further, I want to ask you the question that you ask all the guests on your podcast. And that is, Adam, what do you love about your life right now?
Oh, man. I've asked so many people this question. I haven't had it turned back on me yet, Ian. What do I love about my life right now? I have three incredible kids. They are almost 17. My youngest is almost 17. I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old. And what I love most is watching them find their way in the world in a way that lights them up. Like my older two kids, I have a daughter and a son, both in college. One's in a master's program and one's a sophomore in college in an undergrad program. But both of them are doing what they love to do, and they're surrounded by friends and good people. And my 17-year-old is he's super excited about studying finance, and he's trading options at 17, and he's just doing things that I didn't get to do when I was that age. Yeah. And I'm excited to experience life through their eyes. And that's what I love right now. I love that. I think we raised them to be independent, driven, motivated young people. And it's just exciting to watch that unfold for them.
Yeah, it is really a privilege to be a parent. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge responsibility to realize that it's your responsibility. But again, like I said, it is a huge privilege to have this living being that you're responsible to raise them, and make sure that you do the best you can to make them a good person. Just be kind, work hard, and
totally
make good decisions, right?
And you probably felt this with Dana. Like you bring a kid home from the hospital, right? It's like hours after giving birth, it seems. And I remember looking back in the car seat at my daughter was first born, but I'm like, they're letting us take her home. This is insane. What?
Yeah.
We don't know the first thing about this.
Yeah.
But you do figure it out.
Yeah. Because you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right.
No doubt. No doubt.
You've got yourself in a situation, so you better figure something out.
Sink or swim, baby, for sure.
Absolutely. In speaking of relationships, I am in my second. So Dana and we got married a little over a year ago. And now in reading in your book, there was I believe it was in maybe even the first chapter where what you mentioned just hit me smack in the face. And you talk about, you were actually talking about a relationship expert that you had spoken to. And they told you that the reason couples break up is because they stop living in alignment with their own values. And in effect, they forget who they are,
right,
or what they desire.
Yeah.
And they instead start living according to the value set of the other person, of their spouse. And, I've been divorced now for just about 4 years. And that just resonated with me so clearly. That is exactly what I was doing. Like I had my set of values. I knew who I was. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't stick up for myself.
Yeah.
And what happened was I started living according to my ex-spouse's values.
Yeah.
And I got lost.
Right.
And that in turn made me miserable. I conceded to that. And I was just living life on autopilot, thinking to myself, this is as good as it gets.
Right.
And this is how life is going to be. And I just wonder how many people out there are in that same situation where they don't realize that they're living to someone else's value set and have accepted it as their own and are kind of just letting life happen to them.
Yeah.
Instead of making it happen for them. And how do you get out of that?
Well, I think the book articulates this really well. And I remember going through the conversation with the relationship expert when they shared this. This was actually before 2020, before COVID. And I was kind of toying with the whole value set idea and what are we living according to our values? And there's obviously a value assessment in the book itself where you can identify these are everywhere.
Yeah.
But mine was basically, compress time, take 2 minutes to 5 minutes, go through these 60 or 80 values, create the top 20, create the top 10, create the top 5, and then number them in order. And I remember doing this, and I'll give you a kind of a formal example of this, Ian, and then I'll answer your question about how to get out of it. My wife and I would go on a run every now and again. And when we ran, I was thinking, oh, this is connection. We're going to connect on this run together. And my wife wouldn't say anything to me the entire run.
Yeah.
And I would get done and I'm like, is she mad at me? What's the deal? I don't understand why I'm going on this run with you. And yet you say nothing to me the entire time. And then we did the values exercise. And for me, one of my core values is connection. And so during the week, I look for ways to connect. This is a value affirming, meeting for me, because you and I are connecting at a different level than someone that's just passing by would.
Yeah.
And so when my wife did hers, one of her core values was, it was kind of they were matched together, but it was solitude and nature. And she said, solitude for me is sort of like silence. I like nature, but I like silence.
Yeah.
And I said, this makes so much sense, because the nature that she's seeking is when she goes for a run. We have this beautiful green belt trail that she typically runs on. And she's like, yeah, I want you to go with me, but we don't have to say anything. I just want you there with me in the solitude of it all. And so we were in conflict. You can see between, I want connection, and connection for me means something different than what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm willing to go do this, but we have to then, as soon as we're done, we have to have a level of connection, whether it be discussing our week or sitting down and talking about what we appreciate about one another, have a detailed conversation about life or society. Like, I want to connect with you in some way, shape, or form. And I think, again, going back to the comment you made, how many people live according to someone else's value? If I didn't know what mine was, and I'm going along with her on a run and it's silence the entire time, you can imagine I might get a little frustrated over time. And so I think what we have to do as individuals within a couple is we have to identify what our own core values are, define what it means to live up to them, what I would call the definition or the rules. So the rules of your value means, I know that I executed on this value this week. So like connection for me is, the rule says I'm going to have at least 2 meetings per week with people that I've not seen in a while and have a deep, profound connection with them. So it's a long coffee meeting, it's a lunch, it's going out for drinks with friends, but twice a week I'm doing this. So at least 1 coffee and probably 1 happy hour or social event that I'm doing with folks, right?
Right.
And I think we have to define what those are, because what I realized during COVID was, when everyone was on lockdown and everyone says, oh, family is my part of my core value, but we were all sick and tired of family during the 2020 year.
Right.
It's like I was getting too much of them. What I was missing was connection, and I was missing growth because I wasn't actually engaging in, meaningful dialogue and then study to get better at whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
I think we have to know those things in order to look at our life through the lens of those values, and then get back centered on, what am I going to do to make sure that I'm living according to these top 5 things that I say are important to me.
What do you, and I love that exercise in the book, because I love the answers that I came up with, and they are quickly becoming like part of my personal mission statement. So
I love it.
Yeah.
What were they? Are you willing to share?
Oh, I am. Let me pull out the book here, and let me pull that up. So I'll read you the rules, right?
Okay.
So what are your rules around each of your core values? So I'll tell you, my core values are abundance, love, happiness, health, and significance.
Ooh, love it.
And so I wrote, the rules are: live in abundance, lead with love, choose happiness, protect your health, and be significant. And for me, I put those in that order, but oddly enough, I really emphasized number 3, which was choose happiness.
Yeah.
Right? Because that word choose is so important.
Yes.
And I think for all of us, we don't respect that word enough, and we don't realize that it always is a choice.
No doubt.
Right. And for me, in my story, in my journey, that's what it came down to.
Yeah.
It was a choice to be intentional about the things that I decided to think about, the things that I decided to do. It was a choice to be intentionally positive all the time, because I could have chose to be negative.
No doubt.
But I knew that wasn't going to get me anywhere. That wasn't going to move the ball forward, as it were. So the choice was and the way I saw it was the only choice. It was either I succeed at what I'm setting out to do, or I succeed at what I'm setting out to do. Like
Yeah.
there was no other option. Like that was it. But that was a choice that I made.
Yeah.
And I guess, I could really put choice in the front of all of those. I could say choose to live in abundance, choose to lead with love, choose happiness, choose to protect your health, and choose to be significant. Because it really comes down to the individual and what they put their mind to and what they choose to do.
So this is such a big deal, and I hope your listeners get this. In the book itself, I titled "The Build a Bigger Life Manifesto," and the reason I chose the title and the idea behind it is that I found that people were saying, "Well, I have to do blah blah blah. I have to go to work today. I have to do this today. I have to, no, you choose to do everything that you get to do during the day." And what I saw was that, and I think it's in the subtitle of the book, but it's how to be a life architect, how to be the architect of your own life.
Mm-hmm.
That there were people that were living in these conversations that I'm having with folks. It seemed like they were living in someone else's home, designed, it was designed by someone else, but they were living in it.
Yeah.
And I never understood that, because we do get to choose. We get to decide what our life is like and what work we do or don't do. And I know some people might push back on me on that. Well, yeah, but I don't have da 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 da, right? The reality is that everything that we are doing right now has been a choice or has been a series of choices that have led us to this moment. And so I love the idea that you choose happiness and that you choose to be loving, because it really is every day. If you wake up and go, what am I going to choose to focus on or do today? That's what you get to do.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you have a quote in the book that says, your life is perfectly engineered to get the results you are getting.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you to kind of explain to us what you meant by that, but I think you just did.
Yeah, well, and I'll expound on it maybe a little bit, Ian, because the quote itself, your life is perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting, could be rewritten to say your finances are perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. Your relationship with your children is perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. Your relationship with your significant other, perfectly engineered for the results you're currently getting. You could put anything in there where life is currently, and it still is true. And I think what I wanted, someone shared that quote with me, and it hit me across the face like a ton of bricks. It's like, oh, if I don't like something right now in my life, it is perfectly engineered for that to be the result. So if I'm not crazy about what I'm doing, I need to re-engineer whatever is happening so I'm not experiencing that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think for when I get on stage and I share that message with folks, I think some people get it right away, like, oh yeah, I definitely need to do things different. And some people, I often see in their eyes that they're so ingrained in whatever the pattern is that it's hard for them to see getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And exercise routines and being healthy is a great example of all this, right? Ian, you know this as a gym owner.
Yep.
There is an escape velocity that someone has to achieve in order to create or get out of the habit they were once in and build a new one.
Yep.
And so we had a little bit of a chat about this when we saw each other at EncouragerCon.
Mm-hmm.
But I get up at 4:30 every morning and go work out. And I do that about four to 5 days a week. And I don't say that to boast or brag or be a big shot. Some people go, you're nuts. That's stupid. Why would you get up that early? It took me about a month to get out of the habit of sleeping in and get in the habit of, my brain just fires at 4:30 and I'm like, oh, it's time. And I go outside and I work out and I feel great after I work out, and I eat healthier when I get home and I drink more water during the day. It's like the engineering of that morning has created what my reality is today.
Yeah.
And I think for folks that are like, oh gosh, I would, but just eradicate that from your vocabulary. What would it look like to engineer your morning or your day or your afternoon, your evening, so that you're getting the results you truly want? It's as simple as that. And then you just have to show up and have positive persistence in doing it until it becomes who you are as a person.
Absolutely. It's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner, backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free Rinse PDF. So I want to pick up on what you were talking about in terms of those people that are so ingrained in what they were doing, and almost like they're more comfortable staying uncomfortable with the results they're getting than they are with stepping outside of their comfort zone and trying something different. And it's almost like you have to ask yourself at some point, well, if I keep on doing what I've been doing, I'm going to keep on getting the same results. So why not try something different and see what happens?
There's an interesting question that was posed to me by a friend of mine. And I love just like the juxtaposition of the words. But he said, most people are comfortably unhappy. So I'm unhappy, but I'm comfortable. I'm uncomfortable with, or I'm unhappy with the way my body looks, or with the amount of money I make, or with my relationship. But I'm comfortable with coming home every night and like laying on the couch and watching TV for 4 hours and not engaging, not changing it. Right. So would you rather be, this is the juxtaposition. Would you rather be comfortably unhappy or uncomfortably happy? And I have sort of embraced uncomfort or discomfort in order to be happy. And years ago, my wife and I lived our life kind of by a philosophy that if you do for 2 years what most people won't do, you can do for the rest of your life what most people can't do. And so to do that, you have to be uncomfortable. Like if you're going to do what most people won't do, it's going to require some discomfort. And I think to your listeners, what I'd say is, what are you willing to get uncomfortable around so that you can be happy? And if that's, it's uncomfortable to have to make meals for lunch and dinner 6 days a week. Instead of going out 3 nights a week, we're only going to go eat out 1 night a week. Okay. Well, it might be uncomfortable because it's different, but you might be happier with your bank account if you do that. Right. So I love the juxtaposition of that question, because I think people realize I'm unhappy, but I'm also comfortable. And am I willing to trade one for the other?
Yeah. How do you, so, I mean, as you know, in the society that we live in, that is so, we'll say, dopamine driven and immediate results and immediate pleasure right now. Like, how do you get that message across to people that they need to delay gratification? And in order to get the things that they really want, or they say they really want, that they're going to have to sacrifice some things now, so they can get what they want in the future. How do you make that like just abundantly clear to get that message across so people can just shut out all the noise and just focus on the things that they need to do to get the things that they really want?
There is this idea that we tend to overestimate what can be done in 1 year, and we underestimate what can be done in 3. And so I know this to be true for entrepreneurs. Well, they'll start a business and they're like, I'm going to crush it in year 1. We're absolutely going to dominate. We're going to be a millionaire, $1 million business in no time. And then you realize like, that actually takes 2 or 3 years to get to a point where you're feeling like you actually know what you're doing. And then beyond there is when things actually kick in. And
Right.
I saw this meme on Instagram the other day. It said, you don't get rich in the first 5 years, you get good. And then you get rich after year 5 in
Yeah.
business. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think number one, it's the idea. And again, I've gone back to the exercise idea just because of who you are and what you've done. But I learned of this concept known as your exercise age. Do you know about this?
Hmm.
Yeah. And my exercise age right now is probably 4 years. Like for the past 4 years, I've been really dutiful about working out every other day at the minimum, but 4 or 5 days a week typically.
Right.
And it before then it was you would be hard pressed to get me out and run 2 or 3 miles at a time. I might do it. I might complain about it. I'd be sore for a couple days. And today you could be like, hey, Adam, we're going to go run a 5K or a 10K. And I'd be like, yeah, let's go. Right. Not a big deal.
Right.
But it took 3 or 4 years to get to a point where I can go do that and it's not a problem. I'm not winded. I'm not sore the next day. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I think for people who are super dopamine afflicted or dopamine addicted, and you want that instant, like I want to make money right now, or I want sweets right now, or I want to watch 2 hours of TikTok right now. What are you doing if you're feeding your brain instant, immediacy and the proclivity for impulsivity? What are you doing to your future success if you knew that success actually is a slow bake? It's not a microwave,
Right.
right? Like this is crock pot success. It's not microwave success.
Yeah.
And if you just said, I'm going to give myself 3 years time. I mentioned it before. If you do for 2 years what most people won't do, you can do for the rest of your life what most people can't do. Uh, Whether it's 2 years or it's 3 years, if you're willing to give something 2 years of your life, what could you do on the back end of that? And going back a little bit, you had read again all the things that I have on my list, right? The TED
Mhm.
Talks and the documentary, and I've written 4 books and started a software company, and I've spoken on 750 college campuses. None of those happened overnight. And in fact, at some point in time, I was listening to a podcast with this writer from LA, and he was a sitcom writer, but he
Mhm.
had a book in him, and he wanted to write a book. And his agent said, dude, don't write this book unless you're willing to commit the next 2 years of your life to it. And I remember hearing that, Ian, and I was like, wow, that's weird. 2 years of your life. And I was in the middle of the documentary project, Broke, Busted, and Disgusted. And we were producing the documentary. The goal was to sell it into network TV or some other media engine. But I was like, this is a 2 year project. I have to devote 2 years of my life to this thing if I'm going to see it through. And so everything I did from that point forward was sort of this, if I'm not willing to give this 24 months, don't even do it, because nothing's going to happen in 6 months. It's going to take 24 months to get traction and movement and all of the above. I mean, the universe, the universe, God doesn't even know you're interested in doing it unless you give it 24 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of like a
Right.
passing fad, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So to
Right.
those folks, I would say, are you willing to commit for 24 months to do it? And if so, then Godspeed, go do it. But if you're not, I would seriously cause you to question, what is my motivation in doing this if I'm not willing to give 2 years of my life to get it done?
Yeah. I love that. I love the phrase. It's a passing fad unless you are actually committing the time to do the things that you need to do. And one of the things that you mentioned in the book, and this kind of dovetails off of this a little bit, is if you are deciding on doing something such as going after your dreams,
Mm-hmm.
you write in your book, the quality of life is based partly on the quality of the questions that you ask yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think for a lot of people, we don't ask ourselves the right questions.
Right.
We actually are asking ourselves questions that breed negativity into our lives unknowingly.
Yeah.
And then we wonder like why we're not making progress
Yeah.
or why things aren't going our way.
Totally.
So can you talk a little bit about like the quality of the questions and what kind of questions that most of us tend to ask ourselves and what kind of questions we actually should be asking?
Yes. I love this topic so much. Part of the reason that I do is this was an early area of study for me, Ian. I had a good friend who became a certified hypnotherapist. And he was like, "You should do it, Adam. You'd love it. It's the power of the subconscious mind. You have no idea how powerful you are." I took him up on it. I went and I got certified as a hypnotherapist. And really, what I wanted to learn was how do you tap into that part of our brain that is sometimes compared to an elephant that's plodding along, right?
Hmm.
And it's plodding along doing what it's supposed to do. It's looking for the oasis. Our conscious mind is like an ant riding on the ear of the elephant chiming in, right? And what I was trying to do is figure out how do I control that elephant to go in the direction I want him to go. And so I started studying the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is the most powerful supercomputer ever designed. And when we plug it in with good stuff, it has one main job, that is to keep us alive. And number two is to answer complex questions.
Hmm.
Those are the two jobs of our subconscious mind, to keep us alive and to answer complex questions. And what we tend to do, or what I found people were doing, I was doing it to a certain extent early on, was I was populating my subconscious with really simple, stupid questions like, why me? Why today?
Right.
Of all things, why does this happen now? You know?
Yes.
And then your subconscious mind goes, oh, a question. Fire it up, fire up the answer machine. And the answers come back at the only thing that the subconscious mind is empowered to do. It'll say, well, you were born under an unlucky star. That's why. Or why you? Because your parents didn't love you enough. And
Hmm.
it's that trauma that you're carrying with you from childhood that you just wear like a blanket. And instead I started realizing that if I go to bed at night, and this is anybody, not just me, any of us, if when we go to bed at night, if we populated our brain with a complex question, like if I were to generate $1 million in revenue in the next 6 months, what would that look like? How would I go about how would I go about bringing 500 new clients into my gym, right?
Hmm.
Those questions, once populated in your subconscious mind, the brain will work on that all night long. And I don't know about you, but my best ideas are when I'm not consciously thinking about something. It's when I'm doing dishes or mowing the lawn, or I'm sitting in my sauna zoning out, or I'm running kids here and there. It's like, oh, I have a flash of an idea. Well, your subconscious mind has been chewing on something. And then finally it goes, hey, here you go.
Right.
And so to give you an example of what this did for me, Ian, I was asking, how could I retire early, or how could I make it that life is just much easier, simpler from a financial perspective? And then that led me down this question of how would I pay my house off early? And then a bigger question was, how can I pay my house off in the next 6 months or 9 months? What would that look like? And I would just go to bed asking that question, and it would just start prompting ideas about how could I do that? And lo and behold, the ideas that came up have led to this business that I run called the Shred Method. But it's also run into, like, we teach people how to recast their mortgage. So you pay your mortgage down to a point, recast it so your payment's significantly smaller, and it makes retirement that much easier. And so our brain is the most powerful supercomputer ever designed. We're just feeding it and populating it with crappy questions, and we got to get better about the size and the scope of the questions we're asking it, because it is far more robust and intelligent than we give it credit for.
So essentially, are you saying that we should be, I guess, delving into the realm of possibility with our questions instead
100%.
of relegating ourselves to basically putting a lid on our potential by asking the negative questions?
100%. And I'll take it one step further. Our brain, not only being the most powerful supercomputer ever designed, it is an energy creation machine. So when we have thoughts, the thoughts literally are energy. I mean, this was research that's been done by some of the most brilliant, um, you know, brain scientists out there. But they will say that when you have a thought, the thought produces energy.
Mhm.
And energy, as we know, can exist in both waves and particles. So we have a thought, it emits energy into the ethos. It exists in waves and particles, and this is the sort of the duality of quantum mechanics. But the energy can exist or not exist at the same time. But what we know is that when our brain energy goes out, it's seeking like energy. So if we go, that's not possible. I could never, get 500 new clients in a year. I could paying your house off in a year sounds nice, but that'll never happen. The negative energy just goes out and it finds similar energy. It finds that people are like, yeah, that's a stupid idea. You shouldn't do that. You should live now, live in the now, man. Uh, it's this concert that we should go to instead of staying at home and eating in. And so we're finding like energy wherever we go. Well, I just realized that the more positive thoughts and questions I was posing, the more positive, and to your point, abundance that was coming back.
Mhm.
So one of my favorite books of all time was written probably 30 years ago, but it's called You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. And the reason it was so impactful to me at the time was the negative thoughts were bringing a bunch of negativity into my world. And then I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like putting on negative bifocals every day. And everything I look at is negative, whether I'm looking high or low,
Yeah.
because that's what I was plugging into my brain.
Right.
And then when it's like, if you choose happiness is another one of your values, I
Mhm.
always maintain you can either be happy or crappy. It's your decision, right?
Yeah.
And the way to decide is
Love that.
you can
T-shirt.
either be curious or furious. I
Yeah.
can be really mad about whatever's going on, or I can be like, well, what good things could come of this?
Mhm.
And when you're curious, it takes you in this upward energetic spiral that goes out seeking for positivity. And so this idea of like you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought, if we truly embrace that and we instead choose curiosity and looking for positive, it's amazing what could show up in our world.
Yeah. Yeah. Positive thoughts yield positive outcomes. I am a proponent of that. And I truly believe that, what you think about is what you create and what you
Yeah.
pull towards you. And I really wanted to ask you about this, I guess, this phrase in your book that actually kind of talks about what you just discussed. And it's the phrase inverse paranoid.
Yeah.
So can you unpack that and describe what that phrase means?
I learned this from my mentor, Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul and the Success Principles. And he's been a transformational trainer for decades now, has trained thousands of people. And I spent 3 weeks in training with Jack, and he shared this concept of being an inverse paranoid. A paranoid person would wake up in the morning, walk out their door, and believe what, Ian? If you're paranoid, what do you think? The world is
Against me. Everything
against you.
is,
Yep.
yeah.
Out
Ne-
to get you, right?
well, Yeah.
Yep. Nothing goes your way. Everyone's out to get me. I'm paranoid of the world and everything in it. An inverse paranoid walks out their front door in the morning and says, the entire world and everything in it is conspiring on my behalf today. So no matter what happens, I know that everything is happening for me, not to me.
Mhm.
And if it's happening for me, that's both the negative and the positive. So if I get a flat tire, I'm like, well, cool. I wonder who I'm supposed to meet. I wonder what lesson I was supposed to learn as a matter of doing this. Or I wonder if I was going too fast and I was supposed to slow down. That's
Yeah.
probably what the message was, right? And so no matter what happened, if somebody was rude, it's like, all right, well, I was supposed to learn today that that person's karma is going to come back and get them, and my karma towards them needs to be positive, right? So when you approach the world from an inverse paranoid perspective,
Mhm.
it's amazing, and this requires so much intentionality. I can't even articulate it, Ian, because if you don't walk out the door believing that everything is conspiring on your behalf, the first thing that goes wrong, maybe you're okay with it. The second thing that goes wrong, third, fourth, fifth, now you're like, okay, what is the deal? Maybe today isn't my day. And then all of a sudden, you go down this downward spiral,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Some days it's just like, yeah, I got challenged a number of times to make sure that I was focused on being an inverse paranoid today. And I'll be honest, I'm not great at this every day, but I'm pretty darn good at it most days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to piggyback off another premise that you had in your book, you really have to be in tune with your inner knower and really tune out your inner critic.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
So for our listeners and our viewers who are probably familiar with the term inner critic, you know
Yeah.
what that is. What is your inner knower?
I got the inner knower idea candidly from our mutual friend, Mitch Matthews. And the inner knower, as he described it, is that silent, quiet voice that when you ask a question, the answer comes up. And it's not the one that is critical or self-defeating. It's the one that you're like, could that be right? What you ask a question and the answer comes up and you're like, how is that? That seems weird. But I guess I'll go with it. Right.
Yeah.
And the way Mitch introduced this to me was I was struggling financially in a business. And it was just a rough month. I'd have those every now and again. I'd have a rough month. Cash flow wasn't where it needed to be. This as an entrepreneur, right?
Yep.
I'm assuming you've had one or two of those months in your lifetime as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
And I remember calling Mitch one morning on the way to my office. And I was like, he goes, how are you? And I go, dude, it's a hard month. It's just a struggle. Right now I'm on the struggle bus financially. We had deals that were supposed to close that didn't, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, here's what I want you to try. Go back to your office, sit down, close the door to your office, shut off the lights, sit down at your chair, and just pose the question, where am I closest to money? Just ask the question and then get quiet. And whatever comes up, trust that the inner knower knows what the answer to that question is. And in all honesty, Ian, I sat down, I was like, this is silly. But I know Mitch and I trust Mitch. And I was like, he's not going to steer me wrong on this. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So I sit down at my desk and I ask, where am I closest to money? And 3 names came to the top of my brain just like that. And one was a woman that I went to college with. So this was like 13 years earlier. I knew her from college, but we had a couple of interactions in the last 2 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. So her name comes up. I'm like, well, this is weird. Okay, Aaron. I'll write Aaron's name down. The second name that came up was a gentleman I had met at a networking function 2 weeks earlier. So I'm thinking, okay, this is weird, but I'll write his name down. And the third one was a client that I had done work for previously, but I hadn't talked to them in like 6 months. And so I write his name down. And he said, Mitch told me these names, I want you to reach out to them right away. And I want you to call them. Don't email them, call them. And just say, you were on my brain today. And so I called Aaron first, my college friend. And Aaron goes, God, it's so weird, Adam. I was just thinking about you this morning. And I said, that is weird. What were you thinking? And she goes, well, we have an engagement coming up. And my speaker backed out yesterday. And I was going through my brain, like, who could I call to fill in? And your name was at the top of my list. So would you be available next Friday to come in and speak to our college group?
Yeah.
So I was like, it's almost like, oh, miracle one, check. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the second one, this guy that I had networked with sometime 2 months earlier, I called him and I said, we had a great conversation at coffee the other day. I just feel like it would benefit us both to sit down and meet and just chat about business. And he said, yeah, that would be great. We have some projects coming up that I think you might be perfectly suited for. So let's do that. Let's set up a time to meet next week. And that turned into a 3-month engagement with that company. The third one was a client I hadn't worked with in 6 months. And he's like, hey, I know we haven't done anything in a while. We do have a board meeting coming up. Would you be willing to facilitate the board meeting? And that was a paid gig that happened within like 3 weeks of us having the conversation. So I had one instant money closing event within a week. I had another one within a month. And then I had a 3-month engagement that closed on the back end of it. And to this day, when things are getting, lean, or I'm looking ahead, like, okay, where are we closest to money? I close my eyes, I ask the question. Those names that come up, they're the first people I call. And to me, that is the inner knower, Ian.
That's incredible. So, I mean, is it just the fact that you feel that you are, I guess, tuned in to the universe and the universe is listening? And
I
when you
think it's a
ask
little
those,
bit of that. Mitch would say, "Oh, I got a nudge," right?
right?
And Mitch and Mel, his wife, are prolific prayer warriors, and when
Mhm.
they pray, things happen. You know what I mean? And he said, "This is faith. We have to have on faith that the message that comes up is what is necessary for us. We have to believe that we know the answer or that God will give us the answer. And so, am I to think that it is I'm tuned into the universe or it's a godly message? I don't know, but I think the inner knower is part of us. It is part spiritual, and it comes because we're never, not never, we are more often than not too noisy, and we have to get quiet to hear it.
Yeah.
And it goes back to your comment about being dopamine addicted
Mhm.
and we're too busy in our lives, right? We have so many things going on. We never get a chance to like just sit and listen for 10 minutes. And even in our car, if we're turning on the radio, I had a boss one time who owned the radio station I worked for, who said, I never listen to the radio in the car. And I was like, you don't listen to the radio in the car. You own the radio. What are you talking about?
Right.
And he goes, it's mental chewing gum, Adam. It's mental chewing gum. And I look at social media sometimes, Ian, as this is mental chewing gum.
Mhm.
We're bored, we're listless, we get onto social media, we get a quick dopamine hit, and we move on. What we don't do is we don't ask ourselves a powerful question and then listen for the answer, right? Because we're too busy looking at some silly meme on TikTok.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that most of us know how to sit still
Mm,
and listen, because
I would
we
agree.
are primed to be always doing something. And I find this, especially with our kids, that they can't just sit still,
Right?
even for a 5-minute car ride,
Yeah.
just to look out the window and see what's happening around them.
Yeah.
They need to be on a phone, on a device, listening to something, watching something. And
Totally.
I feel like, you know, we're in a society where people just they don't take the time to just sit still
Yeah.
and listen. And
Totally
and I
agree.
think it's almost like this FOMO phenomenon of if I'm not on and plugged in, I'm gonna miss something.
Yeah.
Even though the most important thing that you're gonna miss is the benefit that you can do for yourself
Yeah.
by just sitting still and listening.
No
It's
doubt.
amazing.
I saw a speaker over the weekend, a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about dopamine addiction. And he was like a PhD level brain researcher and professor at a university. And he
Mhm.
was saying that young people today, first of all, we are feeding their brain dopamine from a very early age,
Yeah.
and that school districts are actually kind of racing each other to get iPads in kids' hands earlier and earlier. And so a school district will say, "Oh, we do it at sixth grade," and somebody else says, "We're going to do it at fifth grade, and then we're going to give it to them in fourth grade." And first of all, it is a $60 billion industry to put technology into schools. Think about that, $60 billion. And what we're doing is we're creating an addiction for our kids
Mhm.
that if I'm going to learn, I have to be in front of a screen, and they have access to all the things on the screen anyway. So the more screen time they have, the more their brain feeds on the dopamine. I need it. I need to be on it. And I think that idea of like being bored, I saw I'm going to use the example of being on social media and seeing this because I too am probably addicted and have a dopamine addled brain. But but I saw this thing that said, people talk about being mindful and what does mindfulness look like and why can't kids be mindful today? We were mindful on the bus when I had to ride the bus as a kid.
Mhm.
We would sit and watch dew drop off the windowsill, like we were being mindful. We
Yeah.
didn't have anything else to do.
Right.
We'd go to the bathroom and just go to the bathroom.
Right.
Like we were mindful in the
Yeah.
bathroom.
Yeah.
Didn't have to have your phone with you. And I think there is something to that. And maybe a challenge for your listeners of, could you take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and sit in abject silence and just listen?
Mhm.
Do nothing, be bored. What would that feel like for you? And then stretch it to 15 minutes and then 20 and then 30. There's a great book out there called The 12-Hour Walk. And it suggests that one of the most profound things you can do is go walk for 12 hours without any technology and just think. And the process of walking and thinking and separating yourself from all of the stuff, you will come to the most profound conclusions you can imagine. So I'm looking forward to mine. I keep saying I'm going to schedule this, and then the weather gets cold, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to go walk for 12 hours in the cold,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I am definitely going to do this 12-hour walk and see what comes up.
Yeah. So it's 12 hours consecutively.
Consecutively. Yeah.
Half a
Yeah.
day just walking.
Yep. Leave at 7 or 8 a.m., come back at 7 or 8 p.m. And the idea is, it doesn't matter how far you walk, doesn't matter how fast you walk. You could sit down on a bench and just sit and think. But the whole idea is to not have technology with you
Yeah.
unless you just have it in case of an emergency.
Right.
But beyond that, there's no listening to anything. There's no watching things. It is literally your chance to just think.
Just time for you to be in the world by yourself, with yourself.
Yep.
Wow. That would be a challenge for sure. Adam, I feel that we could talk for hours. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show, taking the time out to give us all of the pearls of wisdom that you have laid on us today. I know that our listeners and viewers will be able to pull so many different ideas from this conversation. And thank you for having that impact on myself and our listeners and viewers. So I thank you for being on the show. And I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for tuning into this episode. You guys know that our message is always to stay positive, stay persistent, and remember that mindset is everything. Adam, thank you so much. And to our listeners and viewers, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.